You can't even imagine the glitz and glamour of the celebrity world, can you? Coming from an orphanage," said a woman at the reunion, mocking me. "I grew up in an orphanage, without parents." Knowing this, she has always ridiculed me. And compared to that, you're just pitiful, raised in an orphanage with hardly any connections, completely alone in the world, aren't you? She bragged about her happiness, flaunting her engagement to a wealthy heir. Just as I was getting fed up with her attitude, a beautiful woman appeared. "My name is Ryan. I'm just an ordinary 25-year-old man, but there's one thing that sets me apart from others. I don't have parents. I've been living in an orphanage as long as I can remember. I don't know much about it and don't want to, but apparently, my parents died in an accident when I was less than a year old. It's a sad story, but since I can't remember their faces or voices, I never really felt the sadness. The orphanage staff were sometimes kind, sometimes strict. Thanks to them, all of us who grew up together were full of compassion and grew up properly. When I started elementary school and met friends outside the orphanage, I realized my situation was rare. At parent-teacher events, I was always the only one without parents. The teachers from the orphanage would come to events like sports days and concerts, but they weren't just there for me. They came for all the kids from the orphanage. At my first sports day in the first grade, I felt lonely for the first time for not having blood-related parents. Besides the loneliness of not having parents, growing up in an orphanage had other downsides. "Hey, homeless, you don't have a home, do you? Poor thing." Some classmates would tease me after finding out about my circumstances. "I do have a home. That's not a home. It's more like a kindergarten." To me, the orphanage where I was raised was definitely my home. In fact, since that's all I knew, I even thought it was normal. Besides, I do have a family. A family without a mom and dad. What kind of family is that? I truly thought of the teachers and my peers as my family. Now as an adult, I wonder if blood relations are really that important to being a family. But back then, I couldn't say anything and just froze. One classmate, Emma, was particularly harsh in her teasing. She was always bright and seemed to be the center of her group. "Look at this, isn't it amazing? I bought it on a trip to Hawaii." After long vacations like summer break, she would always brag about something. She'd talk about family vacations or staying at a relative's vacation home. It would have been fine if she just bragged, but "Look at this, Ryan. I bought it on a family trip. It was so fun." Well, you probably wouldn't know about that. That's how she used to mock me. She probably felt superior by using my upbringing in an orphanage as leverage. I didn't envy her travels because I had fun in the orphanage, but it was frustrating. I told her many times to stop teasing me, but she never listened. Eventually, I got used to it and gave up. By some twist of fate, I ended up going to the same high school as Emma. Even at 16 and 17, she continued to ridicule me. I hadn't told my friends about being raised in an orphanage, but one day, she let the cat out of the bag. Emma told me, "Is it true you were raised in an orphanage?" "Yeah, actually, it's true." I wasn't hiding it out of shame. I just thought it would be a hassle if more people like her, who had been laughing at me for nearly a decade, started to mock me. "Really, sorry if I upset you. I just wanted to know if it was true." "What? What do you mean, what?" Unlike Emma, he didn't change his attitude after finding out I was from an orphanage. "No, I just thought people would look down on me or distance themselves when they find out." "What? That doesn't make any sense." I still remember being genuinely surprised by his unexpected reaction. He was an exception. Though not as extreme as Emma, most people seem to have prejudices against those raised in orphanages. Besides her, there were others who said heartless things. But I noticed a pattern. When I showed some sort of ability, their attitudes changed. I decided to focus on my studies and sports, believing it was my only path. My efforts paid off, and I achieved great results. Gradually, people began to gather around me, and I made close friends who I still keep in touch with. Maybe Emma didn't like this, but she continued to spread bad rumors about me. But I stopped caring about her antics. By ignoring her, I stopped giving her the satisfaction. Eventually, she stopped coming to me with her boasts. By ignoring her continuously, we drifted apart. As a working adult, I finally bid farewell to the strange connection with Emma. No one at work made fun of me for being from an orphanage. No one even bothered to ask about my family. Thanks to that, I felt comfortable and am now living a happy life. One day after work, I checked my cell phone and found a long message. It was from a high school friend. What's this? A reunion invitation. The one who contacted me as the organizer was the guy who didn't change a bit even after knowing about my background. He was a great friend, and I was excited at the thought of seeing him after such a long time. It's been a while. I'll definitely attend. Out of happiness, I immediately replied. Minutes later, I received thanks for confirming and details about the venue. Thanks for the invite. Looking forward to it. This should do. Wait a minute. A high school reunion meant that Emma, who always had something nasty or boastful to say, would also be there. Realizing this made me a bit anxious. But I quickly remembered the fun memories outweighed the bad, and I looked forward to reuniting with friends. On the day of the reunion, when I arrived at the designated tavern for the reunion, there were more people gathered than I expected. Hey, it's Ryan. Long time no see. Hey, long time. How've you been? Pretty good, I guess. I sat near the organizer, ordered a beer, and started chatting with a friend. So, what's up with you lately, Ryan? Just the usual. Work and life are pretty mundane. That's good to hear. He mentioned that some of our classmates weren't in the best of situations. Some had quit jobs at exploitative companies, while others were recovering from major injuries at their manual jobs. As we drank our beers, sharing updates and reminiscing, I heard a commotion from the back of the room. Wow, Emma, that ring is amazing. Really, really. Where did you get it? The center of the excitement was none other than Emma. I couldn't see well from where I was, but apparently, she was wearing a lavish, opulent ring. Right, actually, I was proposed to by my wealthy fiancé. She flaunted her ring to her friends, grinning widely. While the women were getting excited, my close friends nearby mentioned it in a low voice. Man, a wealthy heir, huh? I wonder how much that ring cost. Then, she must have noticed that we were interested in her ring. She made her way over to us, pushing through the crowd with determination. You guys interested too? Look, here it is. Take a good look. She hadn't been asked, but she turned her left hand towards us. The gemstone was dazzling in the light. I can go into details because it's his work, but then she began boasting about her boyfriend. He apparently makes $1 million a year and drives a luxury car. He even seems to own a vacation home. He used to be a model and was incredibly kind and handsome. She was head over heels for him. I was almost impressed she could say the last part without any embarrassment. Well, you guys are just in a completely different league. Her unnecessary remark caused some irritation. Then, she turned to me with a laugh. You can't even imagine the glitz and glamour of the celebrity world, can you? Coming from an orphanage, she bragged about being born into the upper class, enabling her to marry into wealth. She spoke of her wonderful in-laws and how loved she felt by her fiancé, with a deliberately unpleasant demeanor. Compared to that, you're just pitiful, raised in an orphanage with hardly any connections, completely alone in the world, aren't you? I was just dumbfounded by her ignorance. You seem to be under some misconception. I began to say, about to reveal the truth. At that moment, I felt the warmth of someone's touch on my right arm. At the same time, a familiar sweet scent of perfume wafted over. "Excuse me, do you need something from my husband? Please don't cause any trouble." It was Sophie who intervened to restrain Emma. "She is my fiancée." "Oh, Sophie, you made it already." "Yeah." I hurried to finish up my work. She had an unavoidable job and was supposed to be late. She apparently finished her work early, determined to join the reunion. We smiled each other, surprising those around us. "Husband, wait, what? Ryan is Sophie's." "No way, man, you really did it." That's how our close friends reacted loudly. Seeing their response, Sophie clung to me even tighter. Why would someone like you?" Sophie was smiling, while Emma had a face like she had just stepped on a bitter bug. It was a dramatic change from the proud demeanor she had just moments ago. Sophie had been famous for her beauty since high school. Not just students from our school, but even those from other schools who heard rumors about her came to confess their feelings. But she herself seemed uninterested in such things. She politely brushed off everyone's advances. Being the daughter of a big corporation's owner, she was like an unattainable flower to me. She always had a chauffeur for school commutes, accompanied by a bodyguard-like driver. Even those who admired Sophie could only muster the courage to speak to her. Our close relationship started with our jobs. The company where I got a job offer turned out to be owned by Sophie's father. "You're Ryan, right? I'm Sophie, from the same high school. Remember me?" She approached me one lunch break, a few days into the job. "Sophie, of course, I remember you. I knew the CEO had the same last name, Sullivan, as Sophie, but I never imagined he was her father." Miraculously reuniting at work, we often found ourselves collaborating on various tasks. Working together on major projects, we gradually grew closer. "Ryan, you're doing quite well, I hear. Your reputation has reached our ears." "Thank you, it's an honor. I was just trying to work like everyone else, but maybe with Sophie's support, my achievements kept piling up, and I somehow became favored by the executives. Even the CEO began to take an interest in me. Then one day, after work, I happened to meet Sophie. Ryan, do you have a moment?" "Sure, I'm free." I followed her, curious about what she wanted, and we ended up at a stylish bar. It didn't seem like a work-related conversation, and then she said something I never expected. "Ryan, I've fallen for you." Her words, though familiar, didn't make sense to me at first. "Wait, what do you mean?" "I mean, I want us to be together." I was beyond surprised, calm in my disbelief. I never thought she, whom I considered out of my league, would say such a thing. But should I accept her offer, I was hesitant. "Thank you, I'm happy." "I'm happy. But I definitely don't think I'm someone who matches her. An orphan with no parents. I believe someone more fitting should stand beside a lady from a large corporation. I'm really happy, but I'm not the right person for you, Sophie." "That's not true. You're great, Ryan. Even my dad likes you." "Thank you, but still, it's not right." My feelings of inferiority, stemming from being raised in an orphanage, prevented me from accepting her affection. From that day, there was an awkwardness between Sophie and me, or so I thought, until one day. "Ryan, how about dinner tonight?" And then, on another day, "Ryan, do you want to watch a movie together on our next day off?" And then, yet another day. "Ryan, I got us tickets to the theme park." She persistently stuck to it, almost to the point of being pushy. Her earnestness touched my heart, and I finally shook off my inferiority complex to start dating her. Before we knew it, things progressed rapidly, and recently, we got engaged. Now, we're preparing for our wedding next month, amidst our work schedules. When Sophie explained how everything unfolded, our friends clapped and celebrated. Meanwhile, Emma looked frustrated, contorting her face in dismay. Ryan isn't alone in the world. I'll make him happy. Besides, the smallest unit of family is a couple. A couple is, after all, two unrelated individuals by blood, right? Sophie questioned, but Emma just clenched her fists and groaned. Then Sophie continued. So, happiness has nothing to do with blood relations. You kept mentioning that it was raised in an orphanage, but what does that matter? It doesn't affect our happiness now, does it? Emma finally reached her limit under Sophie's barrage. She grabbed her belongings and stormed out of the tavern, glaring at us with a demonic expression. Some time after that incident, Sophie and I attended a party we were invited to for work. I was wondering whether I, just an employee, needed to be there, but according to Mr. Sullivan, the CEO, you might be the future CEO, so attend and learn. That seemed a bit premature. The man himself was probably somewhere in the venue, networking with people from various companies. Ryan, there's Mr. Bennett. Oh, right, let's go say hello. In the crowd, I spotted the president of Bennett Construction, one of our major clients. Mr. Bennett, it's been a while. Sophie greeted the tall, intimidating Manuel. Miss Sullivan, likewise, it's been a while. He replied with a gentle and soft voice, contrary to his appearance. I had met him a few times for Sophie and was always surprised by the contrast between his looks and demeanor. As we chatted with Mr. Bennett, a voice called out from behind us. Dad, I've finished greeting everyone. The voice seemed directed at Mr. Bennett. That's good, Julian. Networking is important. Use these connections in the future. Commenting on his having a son, I looked at the face of this Julian. I listened to his greeting, thinking he looked vaguely familiar. He seemed to have his own thoughts about me too, as we faced each other again with a strange atmosphere. Nice to meet you, I'm Ryan. Ryan. As I introduced myself, his eyes widened in recognition. Remembering him, I exclaimed, Julian, is that you? Ryan, it is you, isn't it? Julian, you know him? Asked Mr. Bennett, looking puzzled at us. He probably never imagined we had a connection. Yeah, we were in the orphanage together in the past. Julian replied softly. Upon hearing this, Mr. Bennett smiled warmly, saying, Is that so? Is that so? It seems he holds no prejudice against those who grew up in an orphanage. I've heard from Mr. Sullivan that you're an excellent son-in-law. If he says so much, you must be working hard. I respect that. I was overwhelmed by such unexpected praise. Julian left the orphanage when he was about to enter elementary school. He, like me, didn't know his parents, but fortunately, someone came to take him in. That someone was the then Mr. Bennett. Hey Ryan, let's play tag, albeit. But Julian, you run so fast, I can't escape. Ready, set, go. 1, 2, 3. Julian often invited me, a year younger, to play with him. It felt somewhat forceful, but I enjoyed playing too. Of course, Julian and I have no blood relation. Yet, we always thought of each other as true brothers. I cried when he was adopted. I deeply mourned the loss of my closest family. Nearly 20 years later, I never imagined we would reunite like this. It seems Mr. Bennett adopted Julian because they couldn't have children. He had a physical issue and was concerned about the company's succession. So, he opted for adoption, as he told me. Because of his experience, he doesn't see being raised in an orphanage as something special. There's no blood relation, but I'm grateful for being raised well. Julian said, the room filled with smiles at his words. Mr. Bennett seemed a bit shyly. Julian continued to say, I'll support my parents from now on. Julian aims to be a worthy successor, repaying the kindness of being raised. My brother, who was suddenly separated from me in our childhood, is now living happily like this. Knowing this, I felt as happy as if it were about my own life. Then, a woman appeared. A voice I remembered from a recent unpleasant encounter. "Julian, sorry to keep you waiting." "Wait, why are you two here?" It was Emma, dressed in an overly flashy dress. "It's more like my line. Why are you here?" Sophie stepped between Emma and me. Since the reunion, she seemed wary of Sophie. "What do you mean why? Can't a fiancé attend a party?" Emma sarcastically responded, clinging to Julian's arm as if showing off. So, the wealthy fiancé was Julian. Our strange connection with Emma was almost eerie. As I was thinking this, Julian asked curiously, "Wait, Emma, you know them?" "Yeah. These two are my high school classmates," Emma explained in a manner not fitting her elegant appearance. "Really? That's a surprise. I have a connection with Ryan too. He's like a brother to me. We just reunited today after about 20 years. Hearing Julian's story, Emma frowned. It seemed less like she was angry and more like she couldn't comprehend his words. "Oh, like a brother. But Ryan's just a pitiable orphan, right? Why would you, Julian?" "Well, Emma, that's harsh." Julian, also an orphan, was shocked by her demeaning words. "I told you, I was adopted. Before that, I was in the same orphanage as Ryan." He spoke sadly, and Emma stood there, shaking and dumbfounded. Mr. Bennet, watching sharply, seemed the most critical of Emma's behavior. His stern face, when glaring, was so intimidating that even I, who wasn't the target, felt shudders. "Emma, do you have a prejudice against being raised in an orphanage?" Well, I wanted to say something too, but I was lost for words in this terrible atmosphere. Then Sophie spoke up. She used to tease him back in high school. Even at the recent reunion, she said terrible things to Ryan. Emma tried to make excuses but cowered under the cold stares from Mr. Bennet and Julian. After a silence, Emma finally spoke, tears in her eyes. "It's not that, it's just..." Her voice was so faint, unlike her usual loud, boastful self. "I was just jealous. Emma's parents were remarried to each other, and she was her father's child from a previous marriage. When she started elementary school, her parents had a son. The parents only doted on my brother. They never showed me any love. She received food, clothing, and school supplies. Though it was more an afterthought, she did go on the family trips she used to brag about. However, the way her brother was treated compared to her was like night and day. She felt unloved, as she wasn't their mutual child. I wasn't abused, but I wasn't even allowed to interact with my brother. I never knew what family or siblings were supposed to be like. Then she met me. She learned from somewhere that I was raised in an orphanage, without a blood-related family. She had a family but no place in her home. I had no family, but a comforting place. Seeing me, who had what she lacked, she couldn't help but attack. That's why I pretended to be cheerful and exaggerated my boasts. I just wanted to fit in at school. Emma. She lined up boasts and lies, creating a circle where she was celebrated. Desperately gathering friends, she sought her place. Yet, the orphan with nothing was now smiling with friends. Seeing me, trusted and respected, her jealousy grew uncontrollable. "But you never cared," she said. I ignored her for convenience, but to her, it seemed Ryan had grown up. It's not that I didn't care. Her obsession and noise seemed pitiful, and she eventually stopped attacking. "So why did you say such things to Ryan at the reunion?" Sophie asked angrily. Emma, on the verge of tears, whispered, "I got carried away. Julian proposed, I even got a ring, and then I said those things." Her tears smeared her makeup. Ignoring that, She suddenly apologized to me. "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry for everything." Emma. Her apology seemed sincere. Not just words, but truly from her heart. But how could I easily forgive over a decade of harassment with just one apology? Emma. I'm really happy now, being adopted by my father, but being in the orphanage wasn't a misfortune. I had many friends with similar experiences. The orphanage housed children with various backgrounds. We understood and supported each other, living happily. There was some loneliness without parents, but it wasn't solitary or miserable. Right, Ryan? Yay! I smiled a bit at Julian, who had spoken for me, and turned my gaze back to Emma. She apologized to me again, clearly understanding the gravity of the situation. "Emma, I'm sorry. I just can't sort out my feelings right now, so I need some time to think about the marriage." She looked a bit surprised at Julian's words, but she didn't make a scene or reject him. "I'll call a cab for you, so please go home and think it over," Julian said with a firm demeanor, although it must have been tough for him to say that. He probably did this considering that the disdain for being raised in an orphanage wasn't just towards him. Emma quietly said okay without any fuss and left the scene. Later, Julian informed me that the engagement with Emma was called off. It seems she was the one who proposed ending it. He still doesn't seem to completely dislike her. Indeed, considering Emma's family circumstances, there's room for sympathy. That's what I thought, but Sophie had a different view. "I won't sympathize at all. Her family background and her continuous harassment are separate issues. We shouldn't pity her until it's clear she's really repented and changed, right?" "Well, you might be right. By the way, Sophie, you're kind of tough on Emma, aren't you? I was concerned about this since the reunion and the recent party, where Sophie was noticeably cold towards Emma. I asked her if there was any particular reason for this, to which she replied a bit sulkily, "It's just a rivalry." "Rivalry? In high school, I thought she liked you. I always assumed she was being snide to get your attention." Sophie said this shyly. "That means she had been watching me since then." The fact that Sophie, admired by everyone, had such thoughts about me was quite a surprise. Really, feeling both surprised and happy, I found Sophie even more endearing. "Remember at the reunion, you said happiness doesn't need to be related by blood. That made me really happy. The fact that Sophie became part of my family, and that her family has been so good to me. For me, that was a great happiness. I think the bond is what's important in a family." "Yeah, I think so too. Let's never forget this." Saying that, we shared a laugh. Our wedding. Since I had no relatives, it was a small ceremony in a church, just the two of us. The reception afterwards was planned to be grand due to company arrangements. High school friends and Julian were also going to be there. After saying my vows, I pledged not only to God but also to Sophie and to myself. No matter what happens, I want to cherish my family and deepen our bond. I want to be someone all those who supported me can be proud of. Divine light streamed through the stained glass as we made our promises for the future. "Hey Joe, go hit on that girl. Go pick up that blonde beauty with your high school level French. Just go, hurry up." At a hotel lobby where our high school reunion was being held, I saw a beautiful blonde woman, my classmate, who looked down on me for only having a high school education, ordered me to approach her. No matter how much I refused, he kept forcefully pushing me to do it. He seemed to want to laugh at my discomfort, but he didn't know. Fine, but that girl is my secretary. That she wasn't a stranger. And what I am doing now. I am Joe. I grew up in a single-parent household with my younger brother. Though we grew up together, it wasn't really the case during our early childhood. My brother, Mike, wasn't very physically strong and had repeated hospital stays since he was young, so our mother was always occupied with him, leaving me alone many nights. I was scared and lonely during those nights alone. But I could never say that to my mother, who was working desperately while caring for my sick brother. Besides, I could bear it a little, thinking it was all to help my brother. Nevertheless, being alone at home with nothing to do, I started to want to lighten my mother's burden and naturally began to help with household chores. At first, I was just copying what I saw, so I ended up adding too much detergent to the washing machine and troubling my mother, and my folding of laundry was terribly done. I once scorched a shirt trying to iron it. There was also a time when I tried to make pancakes and ended up spilling the batter in the sink, leaving it covered in flour. I once clogged the vacuum cleaner and waited in tears for my mother to come home. Eventually, I even cut my finger with a knife and wrapped it in bandages to get through the situation. When my mother came home, she was so pale and rushed me to the hospital. Looking back, she must have been terrified. And now, I think, what on earth was I doing? But despite all that, my mother never really got angry with me. She empathized with my loneliness and said, "You were trying to help, weren't you? Thank you, but please, no more dangerous stuff. Just knowing you care is enough for me," as she stroked my head. Of course, I wasn't allowed to touch knives or irons anymore, and I could only use things she taught me. But as I gradually learned to do more chores, I felt like I was really helping her, and that made me very happy. My dad left us right after my brother was born, running off with another woman he had an affair with. I used to think he was a doting father and I liked him, but after seeing him betray and leave my mother, I've always disliked him. My mother worked tirelessly, not just at her job, but also taking care of my brother and still keeping an eye on me. I can only imagine how busy and difficult it was for her. Though we got child support from my father, because of my brother's medical expenses, life was pretty tough. I wanted to do my best for my family. With that determination, I kept adding to the chores I could handle. This was around the time I became a middle schooler. I ended up in the same class as a student named Steve. Steve was the center of our class, the kind of popular guy who's always surrounded by people, regardless of gender, with friends among upper and lower classmates. "Hey, anyone up for cinema today? There's a new place near the station. I heard the staff is pretty." Once he suggests it, my classmates say, "Sounds good, let's go." Why not invite the whole class? Right, everyone. Everyone, let's meet at the cinema near the station after school. Before I know it, there's already a plan for the whole class to go to cinema. I got past exam papers from a senior. Seriously, way to go, Steve. Typical Steve. Having lots of connections sure is handy. Thanks, Steve. With these, we can avoid failing. Hey, how about we all study together afterwards? Oh, then come to my place. I've got a new video game. We can take a break and I'll show it to you. Well, I want to go. Steve, who somehow got his hands on past exam papers, is revered like a god and proudly shows official. He's always surrounded by people and loves to have a wild time. I find it a bit hard to get along with him, who's the complete opposite of me. You should come too. No, I don't have money for cinema. What? It's just cinema. You get an allowance, right? Sorry, I really can afford it. At first, I was also invited. But since my family didn't have much money, I never accepted the invitations, and eventually, he stopped inviting me. Honestly, I found Steve hard to deal with, so I didn't really care. However, it seems Steve didn't like being turned down by me. Hey, isn't that guy just all about studying and acting like he's better than us, like a school committee nerd, acting all introverted despite himself? Yeah, I get it. He always turns down your invitations, acting all high and mighty. To us outgoing folks, That's just weird. Anyway, Steve, forget that loner. Let's go out some more today. Sounds good. Let's do that. Before I knew it, I was labeled as an introvert and became an outcast. But it wasn't just me. There were several others as well. Apparently, there were quite a few classmates who couldn't keep up with the vibe and energy, and all of them were inevitably labeled as introverts. Soon, our class seemed to be split into extroverts and introverts. Ironically, despite hoping classes would change as we moved up grades, Steve and I ended up in the same class for all 3 years. By the time we reached 9th grade, we had to take the lead in all school events, guiding the younger students. Steve, who loved festivals and events, was thrilled that he could finally be the center of attention and organize things in his final year. Everyone, what should we do for the school festival? We can do food and drink like high schoolers, so why not just stick with a safe exhibition again this year? No way, we have a stage, so we should do something that stands out. How about a play? It'll be fun and definitely liven things up. Steve starts the discussion enthusiastically, but listening to him, it just seems like he wants to stand out and make noise, which is kind of depressing. If we do a play, it'll take a lot of time on the day, and rehearsing will be tough. Maybe an exhibition would be better. Someone in the class timidly suggests this, but Steve retorts, "What? We were just getting into the idea of a play. You got a problem with that?" "No, not really." "Well, it's fine. If you can't keep up, you're just in the way. Let's just have fun with those who can enjoy it." Steve's idea of a play isn't about a story, but more like imitating a TV comedy show, making fun of someone. It's obviously going to be a poor imitation and not particularly funny, and resorting to inside jokes when it doesn't get laughs will only make the atmosphere heavier. Initially, classmates who agreed with Steve's plan gradually started saying, yeah, sounds fun, I guess. It'll be exciting, right? It'll definitely be exciting. But it seemed too late to back out now, as they were slightly hesitant and Steve was on a roll, leaving everyone sweating nervously. Then, a voice called out, "Steve." "What's up, Mr. Anderson? That play of yours, I don't find it particularly interesting. What part do you think is funny?" What are you talking about?" Mr. Anderson, our class teacher, said, looking around. "It seems like hardly anyone is really on board with this play. Are you aware of that?" Having fun is important, of course, but this festival isn't just for you. It's something we all create together. It has to be something everyone agrees on and enjoys. Thinking only about your own fun lacks consideration for others. A true leader is someone who can take everyone's opinions into account," he advised the irritated Steve. "What's with the sermon? Cut it out." Initially, Steve was defiant, but it seemed to shock him that no one supported him at that moment. "Freaking unbelievable. Fine, you guys do some boring exhibition then. I'm not participating." He snapped back and stormed out of the classroom. Some students worriedly followed him, but I was moved by Mr. Anderson's words. In the end, Steve didn't become the leader. As a class representative, I took the helm, listened to everyone's opinions, and we settled on a safe exhibition, which turned out to be a great success. Then came the morning of the high school entrance exams. "What, Mike is?" "Yes, I'll be there right away." Hearing my mother on the phone, her voice filled with panic, I heard that Mike's condition had suddenly worsened. She told me to go on with my exam, but I couldn't focus and ended up forfeiting. I rushed to the hospital and waited for hours outside the surgery room. Mike, thanks to the doctor's efforts, managed to pull through. However, since I only applied to one public high school, I had no other options left. Steve, learning about this, later found me and laughed mockingly. "A straight-A student like you taking a gap year before high school. That's just perfect. You should have gone to the exam instead of the hospital. You couldn't do anything there anyway. That's just stupid. Man, you're hilarious. Haha." Hearing this, all the feelings I had bottled up inside me just exploded. "Is it fun for you?" I'm asking if you enjoy continually mocking others. Enough with looking down on people." In a sudden impulse, I grabbed Steve, ready to strike him in a mix of shock and anger. But at the last moment, Mr. Anderson stopped me and took me to another room. "You're kidding me. You won't get away with this." Steve's shouts lingered for a while. Mr. Anderson quietly listened to my story. He empathized with my past struggles and even shed tears. "It must have been hard. You felt lonely, didn't you?" Seeing his tears, I felt a slight relief in my heart. Did I make a mistake? Mike's well-being was more important than the exam. When I heard his condition worsened, I just couldn't stay put. The exam seemed so trivial, but still. "You don't regret it, but you feel resolved, don't you?" I nodded, and Mr. Anderson smiled kindly at me. "It's normal to feel that way, but prioritizing Mike over the exam wasn't a mistake. Probably, if you had chosen the exam, your worry for Mike would have prevented you from performing your best." Mr. Anderson, remember, you can always reach out to me when times are tough. I'm on your side. It's going to be all right. Saying that, he gave me his address and phone number. I wasn't in a family situation where I could ask for a cell phone, so my communication with Mr. Anderson naturally became through letters. I made it a point to always write to Mr. Anderson whenever something happened, ensuring I never neglected our correspondence. Mr. Anderson also sent back thoughtful responses every time. Not only that, but he never failed to send Christmas cards and midsummer greetings as well. Fast forward 15 years since I graduated from middle school. An invitation to a class reunion arrived. A reunion for our 9th grade class. Looking at the invitation, I didn't feel much excitement. However, the line "Mr. Anderson, our former teacher, is also expected to attend" made me decide to go. On the day, the reunion took place in the banquet hall of a hotel. "Joe, long time no see." "Hey, it's Joe, the class representative. Been a while, hasn't it?" "Yeah, long time. How's everyone been?" "Oh, you look great too, Joe." Talking with my classmates turned out to be more enjoyable than I expected. Everyone remembered me as a class representative from back then, and we had a great time reminiscing about those days. As we shared our recent life updates and chatted, I noticed one particular group seemed exceptionally lively. "Over there, they're having quite the time." "Jay, that's Steve's group." "Ah, I see." It seemed Steve was the center of that group. Even from a distance, the snippets of conversation I heard suggested they were still as childish and rowdy as in middle school. I thought about avoiding them, but then accidentally made eye contact with Steve. As he approached with a smirk, I suppressed my urge to flee and faced him. "Hey, is that you, Joe?" "Yeah, it is." I knew it. It's Joe, the high school dropout. "What's with the suit? Doesn't suit you at all. Looks like you're playing dress-up, which is kind of funny. You should stick to more low-end attire. It suits you better." Irritated by his immediate rudeness, I replied, "Unfortunately, I have work after this." Then he said, "What, you, a high school dropout, working in a suit? Haha, don't put on airs. What kind of workaholic are you? Working for some evil company? Oh, manual typical for a dropout. Only able to get picked up by those kinds of firms. Me, I'm a stockbroker. Something to brag about to everyone, and it's the best." Every word from Steve was unpleasant, and I said, "Oh, that's great. Well, I have to go," and left the scene as if fleeing. But he called out, "Wait up. What's it like working as a dropout? Tell me in detail. I'll use it for future reference." "Come on, Joe, please. Are you mad because I mentioned the dropout thing?" "I'm sorry. Okay, let's talk. We're pals, right? It's a reunion after all." "Don't try to run away. That's bold of you. But wait, I'm forgiving." So I let it slide. "Come on, let's have a drink and not run away anymore." Throughout the reunion, Steve kept appearing out of nowhere to bother me wherever I went. "Please, just stop." Even when I asked him to stop, he just grinned and kept following me. as the reunion was nearing its end. I was concerned that Mr. Anderson hadn't shown up yet. Was he running late? Had something happened? Deciding to head to the bathroom, I stepped outside the venue, only to have Steve follow me again. "What's up? Leaving already?" "No, just going to the bathroom." "To the bathroom? All right, I'll come with you." Sigh. As I was reluctantly heading to the bathroom, thinking how truly annoying this was getting, I noticed a blonde woman sitting on a sofa in the lobby. Well, a blonde beauty. Maybe she's a guest staying here. She's seriously gorgeous. Steve, getting excited all by himself, then turned to me and said, "Hey Joe, you go hit on her." "What? Why? Come on, man. Try picking up that blonde beauty with your high school level French." Steve approached me with a smirk, his phone gripped in his hand. It was clear he intended to film me awkwardly speaking to the woman in broken French, getting swiftly rejected, and then share it to mock me with everyone. Shocked and disgusted by his unchanged behavior since middle school, I felt too appalled to say anything. "Sorry, but that's impossible." As I tried to walk past him to the bathroom, Steve grabbed my arm with all his strength and urged, "Come on, just do it. Hurry up." Sighing, I asked Steve to let go of my arm and said, "Fine, but that woman is actually my secretary." He responded in disbelief, "What? What are you talking about? Have you lost your mind?" Then, the woman seemed to notice us and gracefully walked over. Steve tensed up immediately and pushed me again, saying, "Come on, stop talking nonsense and go talk to her." "Mr. Parker, you're earlier than expected. Are you done already?" she asked me. Steve was taken aback by her question to me. "It might take a little longer. The teacher I wanted to meet hasn't arrived yet. Ellie, are you still okay with time? Not getting bored?" "Yes, I'm fine. I just came early. I'll wait while having some coffee." "Thanks, that's a relief." Wait, Joe, what's going on here? You actually know this beautiful woman?" "Huh, I told you so." "No way, I didn't hear that." "Well, I did say it just a moment ago." Steve looked back and forth between us in confusion. Ellie, my secretary, also tilted her head, wondering what was being said. "Oh, Joe, is that you, Joe?" Then, a man appeared. "Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson. Hey, you're Steve, right? Long time no see." It's been a while." It was Mr. Anderson, our 9th grade teacher. Yes, I'm glad to see both of you. Especially you, Joe. I heard you went to France from your letters, so I was actually worried whether you'd make it today." "France?" Steve tilted his head at Mr. Anderson's words. "Yeah, I didn't go to a high school in the US, but right after that I moved to France and attended high school there." "What? I continued with college there too, and now I work while traveling between America and France." "What does that mean?" "My mother remarried right after I graduated from middle school. He was my brother Mike's primary physician and a renowned cardiologist. Mike had a weak heart, so with the help of my stepfather, we went to France for his surgery. My mother and I followed along, and we started living there. There, I attended high school and later enrolled in a prestigious university. During my university years, I started a company that eventually took off, and now it has grown into a considerable business with over 100 employees." "What? Starting a business? As a student? Aren't you aware? In universities there, it's quite common for students to start businesses. I met my girlfriend there, and we started the business together." I handed Steve my business card. The company name written on it was a publicly listed one, something Steve, as a stockbroker, couldn't possibly be unaware of. Moreover, it had recently become a popular stock due to its strong performance. No way. Recognizing the company, he was at a loss for words. "Indeed, I didn't attend a high school in America, but in the business world, that doesn't matter. Nobody cares about your educational background. Whether you're a middle school dropout, a high school graduate, or a college graduate, a president is a president. You're judged by your work. Steve stood there, unable to say anything, his head bowed. Why? Why are you always ahead of me? Steve muttered this weakly. I've always resented you since middle school. I was raised in a single-parent home too, without a father, but unlike your family, my mother was the kind who changed boyfriends every few months. There were always strangers staying at our house, and I felt like I had no place there. I spent nights out, trying not to go home. So, I was envious of you, even though your brother was sick. Your family was supportive and close. Steve, you always had better grades and were the class representative, trusted by teachers. In contrast, I was just spinning my wheels, trying not to let anyone find out about my home life, and ended up being labeled as frivolous. I've been scared since then, always fearing betrayal. Mocking you was my way of venting my frustration. Grades are something I worked for, and being class representative was just because no one else volunteered. Living honestly earns trust, and my being mocked isn't a good excuse for your insecurity. Yeah, I know. When you got angry at me for the first time, after I mocked you for not going to high school, I finally understood. I have done something irreversible, but by then, it was too late to apologize. I planned to apologize if you came today, but seeing you so happy made me realize how pointless my life has been, and it just made me angry. All I could do was hold my head in my hands. While there might be some room for sympathy regarding Steve's family situation, everything else was honestly just a result of his own actions. I had genuinely suffered and been hurt by his behavior for a long time. Steve said he envied me, but I felt the same about him. He was always the center of attention in the class, surrounded by friends. Constantly in the midst of laughter and smiles, I often envied that. In contrast, while I did feel my mother's love, I also experienced more loneliness than most, and being naturally bad at socializing, I was labeled as serious. I never wanted to be class representative. It was Steve who labeled me as an introvert and pushed that onto me. When I conveyed this, he looked at me in surprise. I was never really the serious type by nature. I was just a kid who suppressed my own feelings to distract from the loneliness. That's why I always envied you, Steve, being bright and the center of attention. Why? Why didn't you ever say anything? Why would I? You never said anything to me either. That's true, but I had no idea you felt that way. You always looked expressionless. Just because I don't show it on my face doesn't mean I didn't feel anything inside. I have happy moments and unpleasant ones too. It's normal. Jer, I guess so. I thought you always looked okay, so I justified to myself that it was fine to do or say anything to you. I'm really sorry. I was wrong. I'm the one who should apologize for always ignoring you and not verbally expressing my discomfort. I should have made my feelings clearer. I'm sorry too. After 15 years, we both looked down, offering mutual apologies. Then, Mr. Anderson stood in front of us. Both of you have grown up so much compared to those days. Steve, it's commendable that you realized your mistakes on your own. Admitting you were wrong is often hard, but that doesn't change the fact that you hurt Joe. That's something you should deeply reflect on. Yes. Joe, too. That day you showed your emotions, instead of just observing things from afar. I was really happy. It's wonderful that even now, amidst these unresolved feelings, you can acknowledge your faults. Yes. In life, there are many people we may not get along with. In fact, most might be like that. Yet, in living, we sometimes have to understand each other. For me, both Steve and Joe are precious students. Not just you two, but all students I've been involved with. Their happiness is my happiness. You two have resolved a burden in your hearts today. That makes me very happy too. You both are thoughtful and outstanding students. I'm proud of you. Feeling almost too flattered, I couldn't help but laugh. Steve seemed to feel the same way, and Ellie watched us with a warm smile. Joe, over here. Steve, sorry to keep you waiting. No, I just got here too. Is takeout okay? Yeah, thanks. Since that reunion, Steve and I somehow started keeping in touch. At first, there was awkwardness, and our conversations hardly lasted. But now, we can talk like normal friends and even go out for drinks. We often share stories about our past. He told me about how he became independent after high school, earned scholarships for college, and landed a job at a major securities firm. It must have been tough getting into a big securities firm. Yes, it was. I did a lot of preparation and spent days stressing over entry sheets. That's amazing. I admire his effort, but Steve laughs it off, saying, "No, compared to you, I'm just a minnow. You struggled in a foreign country, right? Your determination and resolve to start a business while still a student is way more impressive than anything I've done." We started inviting each other out more often, and now we meet about once a week. Because of this, we've talked about things we never could have imagined discussing in middle school. One such topic is what you'd call romance talk. What? A proposal? Yeah, I've been with Ellie for years now, but our business partnership has lasted even longer. Plus, she's French, so I thought maybe something more romantic would be appropriate. I overthought it and couldn't make a move, but with the business on track, I didn't want to keep her waiting any longer. I can't believe she chose you. Hey, what's that supposed to mean? Just kidding, sorry. I confided in Steve about wanting to propose to Ellie. He listened seriously, despite his jokes, and helped me research things like restaurants with a night view and the meaning behind the number of roses in a bouquet. When my proposal was successful and we decided to get married, Steve cried and rejoiced as if it was his own happiness, saying, "Congratulations, I'm so happy for you." Since then, Steve has stopped making snide remarks. He's reevaluated his behavior and character in both work and personal life, softening his demeanor and apparently becoming quite popular. However, he's confessed that his mother's behavior left a deep trauma, making it hard for him to trust women. Marriage seems like a distant dream for me, but hey, I'm totally content with my life as it is now. Steve spoke carefreely, and it was refreshing to see. I don't believe marriage is everything, but I do hope his emotional wounds heal even a little. Soon after, I married Ellie. Among the guests were, of course, Mr. Anderson and Steve. Congratulations, be happy. Thanks. Let's catch up for a drink once things settle down. I'll get in touch. Sure, I'll contact you too. Mr. Anderson watched us laugh together with a pleased look. Back in middle school, I never imagined understanding Steve to this extent. Maybe, even in the deepest conflicts, people can understand each other if they open up. Ellie and I, from different countries and backgrounds, have become a family. Steve, whom I once detested, is now a close friend. Not making assumptions and continuing dialogue is vital, both in work and personal life. I plan to live by this lesson moving forward.